Thank you so much for coming. Today we have an exciting talk to investigate the growing ties between Japan and NATO. Here with us, we have Professor Yoshizaki from Tokyo University of Foreign Studies. He's a true expert on NATO. He has researched various aspects of NATO, European security, and its implication for Asia-Pacific regions on various national security issues. He has also studied on peacekeeping operations, and his expertise sort of flow in both ways. He joined Tokyo University of Foreign Studies last April, but until then, he was working for Minister of Defense, National Institute of Defense Studies for 36 years. And what NIDS does is to not only advise Ministry of Defense, but also educate self-defense forces, and also compile annual policy documents or sort of security review, which a lot of scholars in outside the United States use it as a proxy for Japan's changing threat perceptions. Because if you track NIDS reports every year, you can kind of see where Japan stands in terms of how they see the world. So NIDS is actually provides a really important information in that aspect. He served there as a vice president for academic affairs from 2022 to 23, but others roles include director of policy simulations, director of security studies department. He has also served as a visiting scholar and lecturer at King's College London, Hudson Institute in Washington, D.C., Self-Defense Forces, Staff Colleges, Sophia University, Waseda University, National Graduate Research Institute for Policy Studies, GRIPS. So we are very excited to have him to educate us on this new development. NATO-Japan ties is not necessarily new. It didn't just start last year, but it has been accelerating, and it's sort of exciting to think about what that means for the broader national security issues that we think about. So we are excited to have him. Thank you so much for joining us. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Ayumi, for having me, and thank you very much for your time to join my work talk on simulations. I love simulations, and I'm doing simulation for undergraduate, graduate, plus international visitors, and also government official, even in university. So it is my great pleasure to share with you my feeling and my kind of tendency to speak too much about the policy simulation, the war games. And later I will explain a bit more about the scenario, how we eat, and also what is the implication for US or New York, that means United Nations operations or international legitimacy. That is very important. Okay, let me start by sharing the slides and give you some idea of my talk. Okay, let me share the screen. Okay, please wait. Oh. Okay. Okay. Let me start. The title of today's talk is Japan's Strategic Cooperation with NATO. And the strategic here, I mean, is global and not only limited to the Far East or the Western Pacific, but connectivity is a buzzword. Call it free and open in the Pacific, coined by the Mr. Abe, who was assassinated, unfortunately, but the spirit is vivid and remaining valid. Connectivity is a keyword to describe free and open in the Pacific. Then NATO or Indo-Pacific connectivity and the AUKUS or the Quad would be a most important policy option for Japan. This is the first time to think that the NATO's connectivity will be the one of the agenda, because of Ukraine and implication of Taiwan. So this is a great opportunity to share with our anxiety and frustrations. And let me talk more about the policy option we can think academically first, but then think about unthinkable. The policy simulation format will be explained in the next slides. Okay, first, since this is the university, this. Oh, okay. Well, the success of the strategic communication depends on our patience. Patience for the unexpected events, then getting over how we can get over these crises. This is a crisis simulation. Okay, thank you very much for your support. Great. Yeah, this is sometimes, well, this is normal, normal. That can happen all the time. Even with I was chairing the defense minister talk between Germany and Japan, and then frozen for 10 minutes. Can you expect how frustrated I was in that 10 minutes, having a defense minister and having a webinar and camera frozen for 10 minutes? It's much better here in New York. Thank you very much for your understanding. Okay, go back to basics. Okay, here in the New York, I go very academic. 3 research questions, why I'm here, and explain the implication. First, why NATO needs Japan and vice versa. Japan needs NATO. That's number 1. Number 2 is that China is so frustrated of the NATO in Asia. Why? And why we want the connectivity and going beyond the hub and spoke system. Hub and spoke led by San Francisco Peace Treaty back in 1951, and also New Zealand, Philippines, and Japan signed the after the San Francisco Peace Conference. Then South Korea, Taiwan became allied. Why? Because Korean War, 1950-53. Then Japan was a platform of continuing war, just like a Ukraine war supported by also Poland. So China may be quite natural to be frustrated by the U.S.-led alliances since the 1950s. They were surrounded by American-led alliances, but I will talk more about it. Then, keyword is like-mindedness. Like-minded partners across the globe and supporting Ukraine, and also we welcome the NATO support to the situation in East Asia, including possibly Taiwan. So, multilateralism, like a Quad and the AUKUS, is a buzzword and very popular. So I will explain why this kind of the framework of the multilateralism is very powerful for Japan and NATO and US as well. Okay. Then, okay. And since the end of the Cold War, roughly 30 years they passed since the dissolution of the Soviet Union. So about the 30 years crisis, like EH card, 20 years crisis. We have 30 years crisis. And decade by decade, they have different characters. Number one, first period was that, okay, the post-Cold War, 1919, and it was a kind of euphoria. The NATO prevailed, NATO expanded. But after 9/11, things changed. So 2001 was a kind of pivotal year. Then, about a decade later, Ukraine and the rise of China, a Taiwan issue emerged. In that sense, every 10 country will have a very different kind of mood of crisis management. Then I will describe these three periods and phases of changing changing phases of Japan-NATO partnership. Then, the most of the important focus of today's talk is connectivity between Ukraine and Taiwan. I'm sure that the impact on the Taiwan is very important. And 2027 Taiwan contingency scenario is very, very popular and well played in Tokyo and also Taiwan and South Korea as well. So why? Because within 5 years, something could happen. That was the assumption we had, not only in Washington, D.C., but there in Tokyo as well. So I will explain why we are so interested and what will be the way out. So I will talk about the impact of Ukraine upon Taiwan contingency scenario or the mindset. Then I will conclude with the implication for Taiwan, and I love to talk more about what I think about Japan, the responses to a Taiwan possible crisis. Okay. Okay. First period was a rather euphoria, the happy moment for Japan and NATO. That the NATO enlargement was very successful one. That means more allies like Poland or Czech, Slovak, Hungary, and they will be a provider of support and also equipment for the civil war in the former Yugoslavia in 1992 to 1995. And Bosnia Kosovo crisis was a kind of effects of the NATO support for so-called crisis response operations. But was Japan a major player in this regard? No. Japan's focus was UN, the United Nations. Okay, let me share some picture with you. Srebrenica, wow, 1995, and the so-called massacre. So, protection of civilian was the buzzword, and the most critical one. Japan could do something. Unfortunately, we couldn't make a direct, positive contribution or participation into the United Nations Protection Forces. We had 0 personnel in former Yugoslavia. Why? This is a kind of symbol of a picture that Mr. Akashi, Japanese, high-ranking man, and he was the special envoy to the Bosnia and Herzegovina, and right after Srebrenica, meaning that Japan's direct interest until the Srebrenica or former Yugoslavia, the peace operations, meaning that Japan will be the supporter of the so-called peace operations. But please look at the picture. We have French general and also a NATO logo, NATO flag. So NATO headquarters and having a Japanese high-ranking man and also in French. So French tried to herself from NATO for many years. But now you can see that the French, Japan, shaking hands, having a more cooperation with NATO. Why? Because this is the last answer to the Masako Srebrenica. Something have to be done. Somebody who NATO. Okay, NATO bombardment was the last resort for humanitarian disaster relief operations. So NATO was wounded, but NATO and Japan could not participate. Then Japan had a simple commitment to support the spirit of how to rescue those who are in danger in the UN flag. So that means indirect, Japanese indirect support to the NATO operation in former Republic of Yugoslavia. Not direct participation, not direct shaking hands, but supporting UN-led operation. That's the key. This is the unclassified slide shared by European Union, the protection forces in Bosnia-Herzegovina. And please have a look at the slides. Left side, okay, UNPROFOR, United Nations Protection Forces, couldn't protect its forces or people. Then IFOR, Implementation Forces, the NATO-led NATO the ROE, rules of engagement, they applied to the operation in Bosnia-Herzegovina. Then have tanks. Okay, so this is a peace operation, they say, but they have tanks and fighters in order to implement the peace accord. So that was the NATO-led operations. Then have a kind of the slimming down of the forces scales. Then say hand over to the European Union Protection Forces. That was a successful case. And please do remember that that was the kind of the model of the peace operations, having a peace ceasefire and peace agreement in Dayton. And okay, this is a peace backed by force. NATO provided, Japan supported, and then have a peace operation, huge number of the protection forces, 60,000, led by NATO, and U.S. took the lead. That's the key. Then Japan supported, like Akashi made the shake hand with the NATO headquarters personnel and high-ranking men. In that sense, what matters is the Japanese deeper commitment to the UN-led operation, not the NATO itself. And the next crisis is Kosovo. You may remember, 1999, and I was in Washington, D.C., and I was in Hudson Institute, and it was a very, very remarkable moment because NATO welcomed the Czech and the Hungary and the Poland as a new member to NATO, so NATO enlargement. At the same time, NATO bombarded Kosovo. So that means the diplomacy backed by force. That was a keyword described by Clinton, the administration, the commitment to the former Republic of the Yugoslavia. Then please have a look at the picture. Kosovo and Sadako Ogata, head of the UN High Commissioner in Refugee and former Republic of Yugoslavia. So this is a humanitarian agency top shaking hands with NATO Secretary General. So this is a symbol that, okay, somebody have to rescue those who are in danger. Then Kosovo refugees will be protected by NATO. So that was a symbol. But if you have a look at the Ogata, Dr. Sadako Ogata's biography, she said that she regret shaking hands with NATO over the Kosovo. Her assumption was that NATO can provide a protection of civilians and rescue the refugees safely out of the war zone. But she found out that NATO bombarded harshly, and not only in Kosovo, but also bombarded in the Belgrade, including Chinese embassy in Belgrade. And please remember that China will never forget about that, the NATO bombardment onto Chinese embassy in Belgrade. So China kicked off so-called the protection against the UN global strike capability led by cruise missiles and also fighters. So this 1999, okay, May, China suffered from NATO attack on their own embassy in Belgrade. And we talked about the Kosovo, but the Kosovo is so far away from the capital city of the former Republic of the Yugoslavia, Belgrade. They're hundreds of kilometers away. Is it legitimate? You can argue. So China may have a very good reason to be doubtful about NATO enlargement due to this, the casualty in the capital of the former Republic of Yugoslavia, Belgrade, 1999 in May. Please do remember. Then, what happened? 1990, 2001, 9/11. I can't forget about it. That's the surprise. And so I went to the War Memorial yesterday, and this was a very shocking moment, even now. Then, the second period, the NATO relation with Japan changed due to the 9/11s, obviously, because NATO invoked Article 5 first in its history, okay? Implementation of collective defense obligations under UN, under the NATO treaty, under the auspices of the self-defense rights, either individual and collectively. The one day after 9/11, so September 12th of 2001, the NATO had the legitimacy to use force under the Article 5 of NATO. Japan fully supported. Mr. Koizumi is a best friend, or one of the best friends of Mr. Bush. So what happened was that global war on terror and the globalization of American commitment, including, of course, Afghanistan. And okay, between Afghanistan and the U.S., where Japan exists, Japan located. So it is obviously the Japan would be a kind of the supporting route for the war in Afghanistan. So globalization operation in Afghanistan and in Iraq paved the way for first NATO globalization and also globalization of the partnership between Japan and NATO, obviously, plus militarization of supports, not only the peace support, but also the war support. So this is a kind of changing moment, and Japan had to think about the counterinsurgency operations, whether or not it is legal or legitimate for Japan for the first time. And I'd like to highlight the fact that Japan was and is the lead country of DDR in Afghanistan. Let me repeat, Japan was and is the lead country of the DDR in Afghanistan. Why? Because the then Prime Minister Kawaguchi believed that Japan had a good history of DDR itself, disarming and dismemberment, and also reconstruction of Japan. So Japan can tell the success story of how we disarm ourselves. And let me highlight the one fact that I'm here as a member and professor of the Tokyo University Foreign Studies, but in that university, PCS, Peace and Conflict Studies, was established. And you may know the Hiroshima peace building the endeavor. And this is the other institution, the PCS. PCS course is a kind of counterpart to the Hiroshima peace building the educations in the spirit of the supporting Afghanistan first, then Iraq, and so-called war-torn society. So let me repeat. So Japan would be privileged to share the lesson learned for the war-torn country like Japan. Then we shifted to the so-called peace-loving country, and we were and is in a position to share that expertise. That's the reason why the TUFS created the PCS course, including in my position as a professor, to share the lesson learned from the peace operation and Japan's approaches in the United Nations. Also, in case of Afghanistan, let me highlight the Japanese support to the provisional, the reconstruction team, PRT, in Changcharan in the north of Afghanistan. That was the first time that the Japan had the direct support to the military-like organization in Afghanistan, PRT, in Changcharan. And please let me explain the two pictures on the slides. On the top, it is things collected in Afghanistan. 1,000 tanks collected in Afghanistan. And picture in the bottom, you see that fighters in Afghanistan, and we were in the position to collect these locally. And one of the buzzword was COIN, counterinsurgency operation. And you will see that David Petraeus, who is a graduate of Princeton University, and I met him twice in Tokyo, and after the retirement. But most important was the counterinsurgency operation field manual was sold, and you can they have a look on the web. And this is unclassified ROM. And one of the key message of the David is that some of the best weapons for counterinsurgents do not shoot. This is exactly the Japanese message. Okay? And particularly after security has been achieved, rollers and bullets will have more important effect than bombs and bullets. This is a time when money is ammunition. That's where Japan's participation support is definitely needed. This is in line perfectly with Japanese peace idea. Okay, peace building, stop fighting, and money is ammunition. Think about the educations and the adult professional career and much more structured society reconstructions. This will be the lesson learned from Japan, not prepare for another war. No, prepare for peace. That's the reason why Japanese self-defense forces didn't change its name to the Army, Navy, and Air Force. Self-defense is a good name, okay? This will be future-looking one. Okay, then here we are, the current period. Post 2014 Ukraine crisis, so-called hybrid warfare frame, plus Afghanistan, chaotic situation. We must stop so-called destabilization operation without stabilizing the situation. That was the unfortunate result. Okay, so impact of the Ukraine is the Japan NATO relationship is can be analyzed in two tiers. Number one is general deterrence. Number two is the immediate deterrence. General deterrence meaning that, okay, deterrence posture in general, in the theater level or global level, and whether or not to initiate the change in the status quo by force. This is a very key lesson and message to the audience. We say strategic communications. But emergence of hybrid warfare in Crimea, what happened in 2014, February, okay, without the shooting the gun, no gunshot, but having a uniform personnel in Crimea and seizing port, airport, and local government and the media, and without having a shot. This is exactly we designed and how to deal with so-called gray zone situations, gray zone, not black and white, the gray zone, how to deal with the emergence of the crisis without having a shock. So, immediate deterrence in the case of the post 2014 is a probability of extended deterrence. So in case of NATO, okay, you know that the so-called forward deployed forces in the Baltic area, not in Ukraine, the Baltic area is Poland, meaning that the readiness is a must, and also support is a must. Okay, from hindsight, this preparedness works right now, but it's how to support the front line in the Baltic plus Poland. Deterrence, extended deterrence is valid still now in that region. In that sense, NATO strategic communication after 2014, it was a very serious and well heard in Moscow. And the Article 5 security guarantee, we had to think about it. And in case of Afghanistan, as I say, that NATO provoked the Article 5. Whether or not the Ukraine would be covered by Article 5, so far, no. That means Ukraine itself is a problem, and Ukraine resilience is a support, either one of the agenda. So Japan's the security assurance made by the current government in the Baltic area, meaning that Japan, for the first time, provided security assurance to Ukraine. That was a kind of news to us. But this is in line with our security, the concept that is human security and support to the international-led operation like NATO. So not big change, but we continue the connectivity issues debate. Then I will move up in 5, 6 more slides to conclude. So this is one of the most important topic, implication for Taiwan of the Ukraine crisis and how we should get prepared. The Taiwan crisis current contingency scenario is well debated. I will talk it later. But two-tier discussion in my mind. Number one is general deterrence. And general deterrence is working because we will try to mobilize the support by like-minded partners, including Australia, of course, New Zealand, Canada, and of course, Korea, and ASEAN countries, plus India, and the other country in the Indo-Pacific region. So in that sense, the like-mindedness has a new underlying the importance. But this is a subtle change in wording. You may remember another term we used. Can you remember how NATO described the partnership across the globe? Strategic partners, okay? Strategic partners. Strategic partner in Asia first came China, India. That means if we mobilize the support for strategic partners, NATO must ask China to support. But like-mindedness is a well-crafted, well-calculated words. Okay, like-mindedness comes from ideas, values, position, directions, not on the scale of export and import, or not the population, not the size of GDP. Strategic partners, meaning that strategic is meaning very important, very big. Equally, in that sense, China and possibly with Russia, in Russia. So the subtle change, but very important change is a wording and naming. Okay, strategic partnership, like-mindedness. So this shift is dramatic. And, like-minded partners in Indo-Pacific is Japan. And Japan share the number one status, can enjoy the number one status like-mindedness because we are on the front line. Another critical issues for Japan for general deterrence enhancement is that G7 summit in Hiroshima, which highlighted the importance of nuclear deterrence. I think this is the first time that we successfully have the support from the nuclear weapon states, not only US, but Britain and France. And let me add one note. Okay, how many nuclear submarine the UK and France has? 4 each. That means 8. And and then have the new long range the sea submarine cruise missile, the ballistic missile, it can hit everywhere. And 8 is almost equal to the American nuclear submarine in the region. So in that sense, as a nuclear experts, this is very important because Mr. Putin insisted that after the limitation of the nuclear weaponry, he insisted that British and French nuclear weapons must be added because the START and SALT strategic arms limitation talks in Moscow agreement covers only US, not Britain and France included. But this time, Mr. Putin insisted that Britain and France must be included. Okay, let me put it this way. Okay, these two European nuclear powers, members of NATO, came to Hiroshima and signed the G7 treaty, G7 declaration, underlying the nuclear deterrence, and meaning that the Britain and France nuclear capability also will be mobilized in the Pacific region, including Far East. And that was the kind of highlight of the Hiroshima G7. This is a subtle change, but for Putin or some Chinese thinkers, this is very important because if nuclear war happens, okay, we have to think about the global arena, global connectivity, or the Bible, or the Korean War, or the Ukraine War, and nuclear escalation. We have to think about, of course, China and the Russia and US, plus Britain and France. And the G7 Hiroshima declaration highlights this nuclear connectivity in the first time, and that was a very successful one. And as to the general deterrence, the third element is the supplying wars. Okay, not to lose war by supplying good support, financial the support to the Ukraine. So keyword is resilient support. Let me repeat. Keyword is resilient support. That is the resilience of the Ukrainian government and people and infrastructure to support it by the like-minded partner and allies of the Ukraine, including NATO member and Japan. So this is the kind of unity of effort of like-minded partners across the globe. Then I have to argue that the immediate deterrence, that is the most important ones. Okay, most important one is that no quick victory in Ukraine. That was achieved. So that means Ukraine survived and the resilience showed. Then the deterrence so far, okay, is maintained. Okay, there is some accident and a kind of attacks from Russia, possibly to the Poland, and also some casualty in the case of the employing the missile defense. And but the extended deterrence in Euro-Atlantic area is ironclad. This is the NATO keywords. Then we have to think about what will happen in the Taiwan contingency. Okay, so China will have a very different understanding of the strategy. And we have some simulations and Jimmy Nomura, the former Asahi newspaper writer, came to the TUFS, and he's my policy simulation friends, and he wrote a book last month, very new one, and he said that okay, Chinese new warfare is very hybrid and no shooting and unification without fighting, prevent independence by force, zero casualty, just like NATO, their doctrine, and zero damage of social infrastructure, not destroying dams, ports, airports, which is not beneficial for Chinese leadership if the unification comes. So, okay, zero attack, and infrastructure will be safe, and it should work perfectly. Then, what will be the theory of victory? Okay, and let me cite the Elizabeth Economist article, new one, and determined against U.S. involvement in Taiwan-based or other regional conflict. That means no U.S. direct interventions. That is a key target for China. And next one is PLA priority, not only guarding overseas asset, but rather securing territories. That means moving limited force. So that means very subtle and non-traditional change may happen. Not direct the attack on the capital city like a Kiev, but the day by day something happens. So let me conclude with a simulation. So we are having this kind of view for you and connectivity, but whether or not this connectivity will be maintained, then my approach is to think about unthinkable and policy simulation. And I did this simulation for dozens of times, and also in the Washington, D.C., and also EU guys and NATO guys and some others. But this is an unclassified academic one, so you can cite. And I'm expecting to do a simulation on March 21st in our campus, in my center. And I'm sorry, we don't do a hybrid for hybrid one, but next simulations will be in May. And second simulation will be June. And if these two will be hybrid. So if you are interested, I will send you an invitation. And this is a simulation in the format of Russia, China, Ukraine, Taiwan, allies. And the new thing is on the bottom, you will see United Nations and Global South. And some black swan event may happen. How the alliance can maintain the level of commitment, of continuity, that is the most important. And I will use the dining options. In this the seminar room, I have my student who plays. So she can make some comment about that later on. But the thing is DIME, Diplomatic Informational Military Education Options. On the left, you see that diplomatic tool and like a strategic talk, UN sanctions, alliance management, and army information, demonstration, cybersecurity, military, this is a key, multi-domain operations, nuclear resolve, don't forget the nuclear one, and economic sanctions as well. And okay, my motto is thinking about unthinkable as the red team thinking. So we have to think more about what if deterrence fails. And okay, let me conclude with this slides. I have talked about 30 and 40 minutes, so I'll conclude with this slides. Okay, answers on the question on the Indo-Pacific region. Why NATO needs Japan and vice versa? Well, things changed, and global connectivity is being challenged. First in Ukraine, then implication over Taiwan. That means U.S. commitment. Whether or not U.S. can make a direct commitment, and how soon, how big. This will be the questions. So I'm very happy to be here in Columbia University and talk more about it. And I have my own comment ready. Okay, number 2 question. Why China is always criticizing that the alliances are the Cold War legacies? Okay, U.S.-led alliances can provide the global resilience, including Ukraine, including Taiwan, and also provide an extended deterrence. That extended deterrence is ironclads, including Senkaku. So in that sense, China may be they frustrated to see that nothing changed in the Cold War commitment. But from Japanese perspective, that is a good news. And Japan could support and will support the U.S. commitment along with NATO's connectivity in the region. And the final questions, why multilateralism is prevailing? Because they are like-minded partners. They can provide a substantial support to maintain peace. So I'm here to talk about peace, not about war. But let me thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
Great. Before I open up for Q&A for the audience, from the audience, I will just ask several questions because it was super interesting. One question is, you kind of sort of chronologically followed development of ties between NATO and Japan, but there seems to be sort of jump in those areas. And then you seem to frame that was because the international environment changed. But I wonder if there is sort of institutional buildup that continued throughout these phases that were not necessarily intended for the purpose of, connecting NATO and Japan for the security of Indo-Pacific, but just happened to be those institutional mechanisms helped to provide the basis for current cooperation. For example, the reason I ask is the reason why Australia and Japan ties are so strong, and I think some of my students here know this, and I've talked about it, is that because Australia started providing force protection in Iraq for self-defense forces. And then that really connected military ties between Australia and Japan. That really formed the basis for bilateral ties in 2007, 8. And then that leads to Quad today. So some of the unintended cooperation or cooperation of the time help build trust and institutions that will be helpful for the later stages in a very different context. So I wonder if you see sort of that kind of history providing trust and institutional depth in this cooperation.
Thank you, Ayumi, for very stimulating questions. And that is exactly what I like to emphasize. Okay, they learning from history, learning from experiences, and having finding friends on the fields. This is somewhat unexpected findings. That means once in the theater, we must have water, shelter, and safety, and that means we need friends and partners. So that's the reason why CIMIC, Civil Military Coordination, CIMIC, became a number one for Japanese self-defense forces. And that was actually the job I did for Ministry of Defense or in Ministry of Defense along with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs because military would like to have their own way and military have a military logic. But in the case of the Afghanistan, Iraq, the counterinsurgency operations and also, this weapon do not shoot, the logic, meaning that peace cannot be maintained by military alone. So the peace would maintained by holistic matters. That means the all government approach. So I published a book titled All Japan Approach, meaning that not only Ministry of Defense, but foreign affairs and also the educations and healthcare will be a part of it. That will set the foundation for sustainable foundation for peace. That means sustainability, resilience support will be the key. And also, why Australia will be a key ally? First one is that like-mindedness. Let me share my personal experience. At NIDS, National Institute of Defense Studies, captain class, the Australian captain is always a student at NIDS class. And the current, the defense attaché in Tokyo is my students. And current, the American defense attaché is my students. So that means like-minded in the classroom. And also we had a student from India, a Department of Defense, and we did a co-op simulation in the class. This is de facto simulation of the practical operations. Why? Because this is quite natural. And we have an Australian defense attaché in our class for 15 years. And also, a key event was that March 11th of 2011. And U.S. has a Operation Tomodachi. We cannot forget about that, how grateful we felt for the U.S. support. And we had Ronald Reagan and other vessels and help support the rescue, the people, and we have a network near the Sendai. And please allow me to explain a very personal experience. In my class, one U.S. Marine, the colonel, was taking my seminar, but within 2 days, he was in Sendai. Oh my God! So he went to the U.S. Forces headquarters in Tokyo, then hurried to the Sendai by AC-130, along with his own gear, transported from the state of Washington. So he could do it in 2 days, and the Sendai airport was closed, but the AC-130 could landed on the Sendai and cleaned the airports for us, and that was symbolic. And after his visit to his rescue operation in Sendai, he came back to my class and I asked him, why you can do it? And he said, okay, there's no enemy. Unlike Ukraine, unlike the Afghanistan, unlike Iraq, in that sense, the task was simple. So in that sense, okay, Australia and America and this triangle is critical. So year after year, Japan found friends and opportunity and shared experience and expertise. So thank you, Ayumi, for let me remember my own personal experience. Thank you very much.
My second question, sorry, I have a lot, but if you could raise your hands later, I think the mic will go around. Second questions, you mentioned about how, British and French submarines will make a significant force if you combine them as a total, and that serves as a sort of signaling mechanism toward Beijing that, these countries come to Hiroshima and talk about nuclear deterrence. But I wonder if UK or France or other NATO countries intentionally signal toward Beijing. You are just making observation, or do you actually think that these European countries are intentionally signaling their like-mindedness toward Beijing? Or is it just about Ukraine or Russia trying to deter as sort of a subset of the sub-benefit of that is to signal to Beijing? What's the take of this? And you mentioned that you've talked to NATO officials about these questions. So if you could share your conversation with NATO staff members.
First, most critical one is that Mr. Putin, President Putin, mentioned British and French nuclear forces must be counted and must be included as a whole, the numbers of the Western nuclear one and kind of nuclear sharing. That's number one. Number two is that, okay, China, Russia has a strategic partnership for life. And China cares a lot about how NATO will be involved deeper in our regions. So I haven't talked with the Chinese colleague with that issues, but Chinese, our colleague, former colleague was a military Academy of Military Science and Defense the college, and they are strategists, and they cared a lot about the European because okay, please don't forget about the North Korea. And North Korea is there, and they have a provocative. And North Korean nuclear, the doctrine may be formed by the French experiences. And North Korea has a deeper interest about the European move because the smaller numbers holding a nuclear weapon may deter the asymmetrically big giant like the United States. That was a take. Then what happened was that Britain and French nuclear deterrence capability vis-a-vis big Moscow. So this will underline the kind of similarity or asymmetric deterrence. That means, okay, don't forget North Korea, don't forget Britain and the France. Why? Because once something happens, they will be part of it. They will be part of it. So this will be thinking about the thinkable. And then back to the basic one is that Mr. Putin cares a lot about the British and the French moves because EU and NATO is very good at the agenda setting and strategic communication and having a kind of the resilient support vis-a-vis Ukraine, plus the NATO's interest in the Indo-Pacific. So in that sense, Japan has a clear interest of having NATO with us. That means kind of nuclear element. Although they're very small in number, in capability, but as to the impact in the mindset of Mr. Putin, that is a big. Then strategic partnership will be shared by Beijing. But okay, this is not a direct. So that's the reason why I put in a general deterrence, not the immediate deterrence, but it will set us a stage for both Mr. Putin and Mr. Xi himself. Thank you.
I can ask more questions, but there are questions online, and I want to involve audience. Does anybody have questions? Yep.
Oh, hello. You mentioned that you were going to consider black swan events during your potential war game simulation for a war with Taiwan and a war with Ukraine. What kind of black swan events are you considering?
Okay. Simulation March 21st will be start from the Philippine Taiwan. Philippine typhoon, sorry, Philippine typhoon. And 2014, Haiyan typhoon hit the Philippines and also Taiwan also. And we have a Filipino their friends in our class. And 11 years back, U.S. took the lead, and the U.S. Marine Corps took the lead. Plus, Japan followed Australia in the team. So 11 years back, HADR, Humanitarian Assistance Disaster Relief Operation, led by U.S. And China said, did nothing, almost nothing. And South Korea provided a ship. Japan provided ISE, okay, biggest destroyer to that region. And also Taiwan provided the ship to the Philippine disaster relief operations. Okay, 11 years passed since. China had the growing interest of HADR, and also so-called a Coast Guard, Chinese Coast Guards, has their own capability and step up their effort, and they're proud of doing a HADR operation, enjoying HADR operations. And what if something happened in the leadership in the United States? Okay, so Mr. Putin may do something in Ukraine and you can handle, okay, this is disregard to the alliance support the Ukraine. And what if your country leader said that, okay, military will do military, not for disaster management. And disaster management is for the local community, local firefighters, not a military job. So stop doing that. But if that happens, then you will see that other country may take the lead. Another one is ASEAN. Okay, Philippines is a member of ASEAN. So what if the ASEAN have a position that, okay, this is a regional crisis. The regional crisis must be handled by regional one. Then I cannot tell more details about the scenario, but the black swan situation is hybrid. And then having a kind of support for the disaster relief. And then change the scenario, change the situations. So that means disaster may be real disaster. Natural disaster may be a game changer. That is my black swan situation. Of course, we have the given scenario in Turkey, we played a lot of scenario like encircling Taiwan and try to block the sea. That is easy to respond because the military is ready to respond to military crisis like this. So, and also that will be the huge risk in the mindset of Chinese leadership. But the subtle change is a very important. So HADR challenge would be next scenario, but I can tell more about it. Thank you.
Okay, so I will take questions from the audience on Zoom. So one from Sean King. What's the extent, if any, of communication exchange between Japan's self-defense forces and Republic of China or Taiwan forces today? And I guess since you left NIDS, you may have more flexibility of talking about this kind of issue. The other questions come from Professor Inang Hu. She goes, thank you for a very thoughtful, provoking talk. I have two quick questions. One, to what extent is China's ban on Japanese seafood imports to a statement? Is it to what extent is that a statement of protest against Japan's intention to cooperate with NATO in Asia? Second questions. Are you concerned that the minilateralism in Indo-Pacific fostered under Biden administration will come apart if Trump wins the next presidential election?
Okay, then let me respond one by one. Number one question is that, okay, Japanese self-defense forces cooperation, possible cooperation with Republic of China, the Taiwan. Okay, and number one issue is that, okay, NATO Defense College invite Republic of China National Defense University for many years. And I met them in many conferences, and we share the concerns of Indo-Pacific one, meaning that, okay, Britain and France and the US, especially US, has a huge impact. So in that sense, the defense university level cooperations is one of the first step, and so far there is none, and except the Switzerland's the GCSP, Geneva Center for Security Policy, had a joint project with the Republic of China National Defense University 3 years back, and I happen to be one of the member. And this is a private project, but sponsored by Switzerland, okay, neutral country, and the GCSP is the neutral the one, but they have a booklet and they have a 3-year studies, and for the first one, and we got the permission from the Ministry of Defense, and we made it. I think that was the first self-defense forces and the National Defense University, the co-project. So that means academic one. But in order to, but the more operational one, maybe that is my personal one, personal take, and not the official one. But since I'm academics and I'm a university professor, I can mention it. The first one is that, okay, observer status, the participation to the HADR, the Humanitarian Assistance Disaster Relief Operation exercises near the southwest, the island chain, and near Taiwan, near Republic of China. And self-defense forces have the many exercises, and so far there is none with the Republic of China, but possible, okay, observer status, information sharing, and okay, co-locating with self-defense force ships. That may be one of the agenda for HADR, and not the middle one.
Just to clarify
Yes.
that there isn't still none
No.
in even in HDR,
Yes.
HDR operations.
Yes.
Okay, but the next step might be granting observer status in
Yes.
that kind of operations in the Southwestern Pacific.
And also Coast Guard level, we have one, but no, the self-defense forces and self-defense forces and the Republic of China's coast, the naval vessels level, but the same scenario may apply. Then, what if the situation escalate itself? Not only the HADR, but also much more man-made disaster. Then we have to think about it. So this may be a kind of a scenario we can make. And also, okay, maintenance of the Republic of China weaponry in Japan. That means supplying the, not the equipment, the supply of repairs, and also personnel may be available. So far, there is none. Okay, number 2 question is that, okay, Chinese sanction of Japanese the seafood product. And my sense is that this is a part of the strategic communications, the how Japan will get ready and how Japanese public will look to these situations. And if Japanese public is okay, reacting harshly to the Chinese one, that is the Chinese sanction, the harsh one meaning that, okay, Japan would also make a kind of a equal level of sanctions, or we step back and okay, we will stop the Fukushima things and change the government status, and the public will try to stop the Japanese government movement. So they may be having a testing how the public and government will react in these situations. So but, my take is that this is a part of strategic communications, and so we should not overreact, and we should have a unified position. That's my take. And last one
So
is
just like that, so that means it's nothing to do with Japanese cooperation with NATO in Asia. You don't think so?
I hope
It's
so.
really, it's really about just
I hope so.
Fukushima treated water
Yeah,
into the ocean, not about the
No.
signaling. Okay.
Yeah, that's my take. And the last questions in the future of the multilateralism. What if the change of government in the Washington White House and the new leader would like to stop any Biden related thing? What will happen? Well, that's exactly the biggest worry in Tokyo. And so that's the reason why we're doing like many what if Mr. P comes back. And we have so many simulations, including myself. And the thing is that pragmatist and and the White House and the Foggy Bottom and the Pentagon would like to continue the pragmatic, the cooperation, because the multilateralism is the best answer to the responses to our regions. So there in Kasumigaseki and Ichigaya, the situation is the same. Pragmatic cooperation is a must. So this is a step by step. But when it's come to your questions, what if Mr. P is come back? Well, this is a political one, and I have no answer. But in case of the first, in case of Mr. Trump was in White House several years back, Mr. Abe was the best friend of Mr. Trump, and shaking hands with Mr. Trump in order to have a better understanding of what's happening in the White House and try to mitigate the impact, an unnecessary impact to the existing framework. And the key thing is agenda setting. And what if Mr. P is back and set the agenda setting all by himself? That means disregards any suggestion from the pragmatist, the Pentagon. That's tragedy. And in this sense, unilateralism is best available options. But what if something happens? I don't know. Actually, I don't know.
Any other?
Great speech, sir. So I think you made a good point when you showed a diagram earlier, where you showed that the situation with Ukraine being supported by Europe and America is mirrored in the way that Japan supports Taiwan against China. So I guess my question is two parts. Do you think that it is likely that in the near future, a conflict does break out between Taiwan and China? And if that were to occur, what responsibilities would Japan have to Taiwan, and how would that affect Japan?
Okay, thank you. First one is okay. The most key lesson learned from the Ukraine is resilience support, importance of resilience support, and the resilience has many levels. First one on the top is top leader. So top leader must maintain its position as it is. So don't go out of the position. Okay, so in case of Afghanistan, okay, presidents went out on the first day. That was terrible. Okay, the resilience support on the top. And then second one is that public support for the top leadership to maintain the position and resist. So-called morale is very important. Then on the bottom, infrastructure. That means the water supply and the health supply, and also public supports and the human movement, refugees or incoming supports. This kind of railway and also in case of Taiwan, airport and seaports, maintenance is a key. So in that sense, resilience support, even if something happens, we must be determined to continue resilience support. And what is needed for resilience supports? Public support, number one, and money. So in order to maintain money, year or 2 years or 3 years, well, in case of Ukraine, this will be the third year. That means we have to mobilize the public support to maintain the morale in a target area. That is the key. Then, do I think that contingency will happen? Okay, never say never. Never say never. That is my answer. That means black swan situation can come. And my take is that when China is determined to change the status quo by force in a very radical way, that is the bombardment surrounding the island and block the sea lanes and having a light, change of status quo by military forces. Okay, U.S. will be natural position to respond. Okay, then U.S. Japan cooperation is a must, and Okinawa will be in the positions. Then it may be much easier to respond to the gray zone situation, because this is a black and white situation. So we'll be in the right position to support the Taiwan issue, Taiwan people, because they are being attacked. And China may say this is the domestic issues and no other party should be involved, but this is outright a change of status quo by force. Then naturally, it may be much easier than gray zone situation, because this is black and white, and U.S. will be involved and Japan will be mobilized as a kind of chain reactions. But my black swan situation is that, subtle day after day being affected, and the natural reason for continent China to support Taiwan by one is a natural disaster response. So in case HADR, they can do a lot of things. So that's a case that's a scenario I worry a lot. The reason why I'm here to talk about it. So be aware of the gray zone situation, HADR, and disaster management. U.S. should welcome, the ASEAN support and multilateral support and support to the Japanese endeavor and HADR, because that would be the best solution for U.S. presidency and U.S. public in the longer term. That's the message I'd like to convey to you. Thank you.
Yeah, I have 2 questions related to the Global South. So on your simulation game, I'm curious, what's the role of Global South? And in the actual policy world, I'm curious whether China is also looking for line-minded partnership among the Global South and how successful it has been.
That's exactly why I'm here to talk about it. Because in Tokyo, they look to the Ukraine situation, NATO, and also alliance things and the military thing only, and forget about the Global South longer term support to Ukraine situation and provide the suffering to the Global South people. And I deeply regret that many of the Japanese scholars lost interest in UN-led operation in Africa, and the African PKO terminated, and MINUSMA and some others. It means budget decrease and personnel decrease. And my message is that we must stop that. And we should maintain the level of commitment to the UN-led operation because Japan could a lot of things to help support that. Otherwise, as you mentioned, okay, the global south may look to China, India, and even Russia. So in that sense, global south, for example, in criticizing in Russia in the General Assembly United Nations, okay, majority of the global south may be very reluctant. And so the simulation I'm thinking about is that, okay, you want a team and global south team, and they should set the agenda. And whether or not the China or Russia would be supported by Russia, supported by global south or not. If global south budget fully support the Chinese or Russian position, then this would be the game one. If the China global south will look to the Western camp, and this will be game two. So we may have a different setting. So but the challenge is that agenda setting and majority and the global kind of trends, global supports. Of course, as to the money, as to the material support to the Ukraine, well, the advanced country can do a lot of things with the railways and support and the ports and transportation, blah, 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 and financial support. But when it's come to a long-term support from global south, well, we have a huge difficulty. And also, where India fits in, we have no idea. So in that sense, a United Nations team and Global South team will set the agenda. Then how NATO, U.S. Japan will react. That was the game setting of my game in this coming March 21st.
Any other questions, Walter?
Thank you for such a wonderful talk. I just wanted to have a question related to your simulation, particularly how you see Sino-Russian strategic partnership. I was interested to hear if you see that there could be any potential for a divergence between the two partners. For instance, when I think about the war in Ukraine, China has not been necessarily entirely supportive of Russia's war effort. As a matter of fact, China has suffered quite a bit of diplomatic standing loss in Europe, and Chinese investment in Ukraine has been destroyed. I'm interested to hear that if you see a flip side where you see China pursue a hybrid war against Taiwan, do you think that Russia would similarly be reluctant to go out on a limb for China like China has been for Russia?
Thank you. And that is
Oh, yes. Thank you for your talk. My question is in regards to the war games as well. I'm just kind of curious if when you were overseeing these war games, if you saw any structural challenges with all these alliances and militaries coming together in a Taiwan contingency, like just the military mechanics of all of it, if there were any challenges that you saw with all these like bodies of countries working together.
Thank you. And first one is that, okay, sorry, would you repeat that?
I'm very curious to hear how you see the
Yes.
Sino-Russian strategic partnership. If you could see that there could be a potential point of divergence between both.
Yeah, thank you. That is a key question, how this describe the level of the cooperation between Beijing and Moscow. And that is one of the independent variables of the games, actually. And so number one is they are solid. And number two is they are spread. And we can design a bit different game. But so far, my assumption is that they have ironclad solidarity. And because they have huge challenges in Ukraine and Taiwan. But you're right, in actual arena, the Beijing refrained from the direct support to the military operation in the Ukraine and refrained from a diplomatic full-fledged support to the Moscow. and that is a reality. So, but my assumption in the game is that they will have a growing their interest because the situation in Ukraine broke down, and Mr. Putin asked Mr. Xi more support for financial, diplomatic, military. Then the Mr. Putin must listen to Xi's request in this area, and this will remind you about the Vostok 2022 a year ago, and the Beijing China has a bigger say and bigger the input and the influence over the Moscow because Moscow could deploy the only 50,000 previously 300,000. So scale down of the Russian forces due to the shortage of human. Then Chinese impact onto the exercise is huge. Then what if that the exercise go down south? And so far, there is no such thing like a joint drill near the Taiwan Strait due to the Russian concerns of being involved. But what if Russia cannot say no to these situations? That will be the kind of challenge for next the simulations. And also, okay, the military relationship in case of the Taiwan contingency, and also how far to think about unthinkable. This is the realistic assumption or not? And okay, to be frank, Taiwan issue was a taboo for self-defense forces officers in Japan. Plus, military to military cooperation over Taiwan contingency was also taboo. So in that sense, designing the simulation over Taiwan in the official sense was a taboo. But now, the many think tanks in Tokyo has lots of the simulations. And let me cite my personal the experience in a workshop. I make a presentation over simulations. Then one professor from National Defense University asked me about and complained about NHK hosted Taiwan contingency program, which was broadcasted on the December 2027. And so she was so frustrated. And are you supportive of that scenario? Are you a member of that scenario? She asked me. And she insisted that that kind of simulation must be stopped because this is the internal issues for China, and Taiwan should not be the target of the policy simulations. And my response is quite clear that, well, okay, this is private, and we have, freedom of speech, and we can think about unthinkable. And let me ask you, Sam, why you were so frustrated? Thinking about by the academic is quite natural for us. And she didn't answer to me. But the issue is that China has a growing interest concerns at how far the like-minded partners like Japan and Australia or NATO will be involved in that, thinking about that, unthinkable scenario. This military direct participation will be very limited, and on a personal level only. So in that sense, titles matters so far. But when it's come to the academic one, like, okay, I talked about the general deterrence, immediate deterrence. Okay, immediate deterrence failure, meaning that Taiwan contingency. So it is a very academic way that what if immediate deterrence fails in our regions? I didn't mention Taiwan as a target, but you can imagine that I'm talking about that things. So in that sense, well, having a simulation can send a right message and a wrong message. And the right message meaning that we are getting prepared. And I have many different scenario. And I have had contact with the MOD, and I've done lots of simulation with former students who are in the who are in the defense attaché and embassy, and this is right signaling for the right signaling. But the wrong signaling is that, okay, Japan will be prepared of bad things. Okay, we will copy and we will do it immediately before being prepared for the Japanese sites. That means the simulation may be the reality. So we should avoid. So, okay, start now and get prepared. And at minimum, we should share the sense of urgency, because HADR operation can happen every year. It can happen right now. So that's a worst case scenario. And under the name HADR, they can mobilize ships, and also they monopolize the airport and port by having a goods and personnel. So this is the worst case scenario. So we should have a simulation. Thank you.
Okay, on that happy note, we will close our conversation today. Thank you so much for coming. We have dinner for you all. So let's, if you can stay and hang out and ask more questions, speaker will be here. Thank you again, and please join me thanking Professor Yoshizaki.
Thank you.